Well, I'd like to extend my welcome to you guys and all the folks that are out here today. I'm a part of the soil health area team, and then we have a cover crop team that we're going to talk about. The four of us are part of that team, and we're going to talk about some of the local results that we found this year, and I think you'll find them pretty interesting, and pretty much supports what Gabe was sharing earlier about the bottom line. And we're going to get into some of the overview stuff today on our results that we did this year, and then in the breakout sessions we're going to get into the economics in much more detail. So if you are interested in what's been going on with cover crops, please feel free to come up and talk to us. And we also, if you're interested, would like to be a part of the soil health team. See Trish, Jerry, Paul, and give us your email, and we'll send it out, and you guys can come to the meetings and help us as we're planning all this good stuff. Unlike Gabe, I gotta have notes. So this morning we have the privilege of sharing with you some of what we've learned this past summer and fall with our second cover crop trials that we've done here in the Valley. Cover crops and their many uses and applications and variations is one of the many tools that we have in our soil health toolbox. This past year we worked with a number of local producers using cover crops on a variety of different situations. During this session we will visit about the reasoning behind using the cover crops for soil health, some of the potential benefits of cover crops, some of the different variations of cover cropping that we were involved with, and a bit of discussion on some of the results. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask as we go through the presentation. I don't mind being interrupted. Just make sure you shout it out because you guys are kind of dark out there, okay? Okay, so the local cover crop trials. Okay, the purpose of the local cover crop trials was to provide technical assistance and advice to landowners and operators on a wide array of methods and applications to advance the principles of soil health. Number two, to provide limited financial assistance in field applications. And three, provide baseline data, soils tests, forage analysis, different things like that, to support and document the practices and results that we were doing. We were to share number four is to share the results with the landowners, operators, and other interested parties to further our local knowledge and understanding of soil health and related practices. And this is what we're going to be engaging in today, is these things. And so basically, there was a need to say, and again, we've heard this, well, it can't be done locally. Well, we're doing it locally, and this is some of the things that we did find out. Okay, so applications and benefits. Can we see all this, or is it top missing there? Okay, well, the very top part says armor the soil, and we've heard that, and that's an important part of it, okay? And basically we've seen that with Gabe's presentation when he was showing the soil temperatures and the fluctuation of these soil temperatures. Think about it. I mean, if you're alive and you're living, do you like to have hot, cold, hot, cold? I mean, you know, I've had enough cold personally this winter, but you know, having widely fluctuating soil temperatures generally isn't healthy for any kind of biology, including that which is living in the soil. And so armoring the soil basically protects against this. And it is becoming increasingly evident that covered ground, whether by living or dead plants or plants byproducts, loses less moisture than bare ground. And I see this in my own garden. I'm an avid gardener, and I've been no-till for 4 years in my garden now. But you know, when my garden canopies, I don't have to water as much. When I keep my ground covered, it stays more moist underneath. And I've been noticing that kind of stuff, whether I have residue on it or living plants. And so it's important to understand that you're actually conserving water when you're armoring the soil. Okay, and we heard about minimizing soil disturbance. And again, it just kind of fits right in with what Gabe was sharing. Soil disturbance isn't natural in the natural ecosystems. And again, if you also heard him say, if you fight nature, you're going to lose the battle eventually. And so, again, minimizing disturbance in the soil basically is one of the tools that we have in our toolbox for soil health. Okay, and then we heard this, increasing diversity. And again, our cover crop trials are going to cover all these different things that we're talking about here. If you look up here, there's a slide over there on the right, and that is actually a side-by-side comparison that Gabe said might be the way you want to look at stuff. But the field, it would be to your right, that slide there. The field on the left is a monoculture, and the one on the right is a cover crop. And it's interesting that you were talking about it because, you know, we actually were finding that we did have more productivity on the mixes in general when we compared them like this. Okay, keeping living roots. Again, we talked about this. One of the things that I've noticed as the producers plant cover crops in there, and I like to get in there and I like to dig around in the soil. It's probably because I'm a soil scientist. But anyways, I enjoy looking at what happens with these roots and understand that the plant is going to try to create an environment, a microsite that is favorable for its life, okay? And it wants to, like you and I, get as much benefit as we can with expending as little energy as we can. And so one of the things you notice when you start pulling up these roots of these cover crop plants is that, especially in the grass species, you see all these little balls hanging off the root, balls of soil. And, you know, Gabe touched on this morning about the soil glue. And each one of those little balls is actually a little living world in itself. It has mineral, it has air, water, it has the biology that's all intact there. And it attaches to the plant root, again, in part of that carbon exchange process. And again, it's part of that symbiotic systems that we understand so little of, but we can see the evidence of that. And so these plants literally collect these balls of soil as they grow around their roots, again, to enhance their ability to live and grow. Okay, we talked about integrated livestock grazing and how that is important. And if you think about it in a natural system, animals were a part of that. Grazers were out there and they were grazing the land. And again, if we as managers of the land manage this properly, it is a benefit to our system. And again, you need to think of your place, your ranch, your farm, your garden as a living system that you are working with and impacting with everything that you do out there. And so, again, I think if you take a look at this is some cover crops that were being grazed. And as we look at these cover crops, a lot of them will have some background pictures where you've got corn and stuff. And I just want you to, while we're going through these, you're going to see a couple more, note where the cows are, okay? And so these cows are there, and a lot of times when you're winter feeding, where does all your animal waste products go? Right where you put the hay, right? Right where you put the food down for them. Here, it's all distributed randomly, equally across the area. And again, it's important to understand that. A big pile of stuff is going to be harder to process and decompose than little piles and clumps of things. Okay, the principles of soil health help to mimic some or all of the natural ecosystem features. The closer one mimics these natural systems, the less outside inputs may be needed to maintain the production system. The results are healthier soils, which result in healthier plants, higher production, and increased nutritional quality of plant products. And again, if you take a look at that, where that finger is pointing, that's mycorrhizal fungi, okay? And that's mycorrhizal fungi showing up in a field that had sweet corn on it 10 weeks earlier. So somebody was asking how fast this stuff can show up. There it is, 10 weeks. And again, there wasn't any mycorrhizal inoculation or anything that happened. It was there, and once it was given that opportunity to grow, it grew. Okay, we believe that applying practices that incorporate some of these principles will result in positive effects for the producer, the consumer, and the environment. The thought is that doing something is better than doing nothing when it comes to soil health. And it's the same way with you. If you do nothing, but then you say, well, I'm going to go out and at least take a walk a day, that's better than doing nothing. And I think that's a key to understand here is that, you know, all of us, I've used a swimming pool and you know, a swimming pool example. For, you know, some of us, we go up to a swimming pool and we're like, Gabe, we just jump in, you know. I got to do this. I'm going to get in the water. I'm going to, you know. And then some of you are kind of like me. Well, you know, I really don't like that cold. And so, you know, I might go up and kind of stick my legs in and sit there for a minute and then decide whether I want to go in a little further. And again, that's true. I mean, some people are risk takers and some people are very cautious. And with soil health, you know, you don't have to do it all at once. But doing something is better than nothing. And that's what we're finding out with this. Doing something is better than doing nothing. Okay, so now we have basically, you can see the efforts of the cover crop trials. This was a bus. We did have a cover crop tour that we took and looked at some of these local producers that we were working with this year. Again, we will probably have one this coming fall if you're interested in doing that, to actually come out and see what we've got going on the ground. And of course, here we are, and how our team got together was a couple years back. We kind of, when we have a moment in our office, we talk about the Broncos once in a while, but we talk about soil health even more. And we all got talking about soil health in the office here, the four of us, and finally we said, well, why don't we do something about it? So we took a little bit of our extra time that we didn't have but made, and formed this team that we've had together that has been working on these things for the last couple of years. Okay, so what are cover crops and their benefits? Okay, well, here's the definition of those and what they are and what they do. And we will be moving into much more detail on this in the breakout session on the economic side. Because what we did is we did a bunch of tests and we measured what was being produced, and then we did some calculations as to the benefits from livestock and then potential benefits for future crops to be planted in, after the cover crops. Okay, you heard Gabe talk about these the different plants and their different groupings. Well, here's some of the groupings that you can deal with. And again, I don't think it's so important that you pick a certain species as to pick a group of things that could conceivably work together. And some of the producers that we've been working with have been trying this for several years, and they varied their mixes and changed and adjusted based upon their management needs. And one of the nice things about soil health and cover cropping is that you decide what's best for your operation. It's customized farming. It's not one shoe fits all, but what are your needs? And then you use the tools of nature to address those needs on your particular ground for your particular operation. Okay, so cover crops to address common goals, okay? Capturing nitrogen. One of the things that we're going to be facing as a community, as a state pretty soon, is there's going to be some regulations concerning nitrogen and phosphorus in our waterways. And some of the results that I've heard in the past for some of our local waterways, it doesn't bode real well. If we can recapture some of the nitrogen that's in the soil and cycle it and hold it for our cash crops, then it's not going to end up in our waterways, and it's not going to be as big an environmental concern that we potentially could have in a very few short years here. And so, again, capturing nitrogen, I mean, if you take a look at these roots here, you notice that in this diverse mix of crops, you have different sizes, types, and diversities. Each plant becomes a tool that you use to, and it does specific things for your soil. So, what do you think the big roots do? What do you think the little roots do? And again, this is how nature chose to keep things closed. In other words, there's only so much limited resources, and these plants are going to take advantage of all of them, and they each have a specific thing that they're best at, kind of like people. Okay, so cover crop mixes often include one or more varieties of legumes, and again, if you look, you were talking about, Gabe was talking about nodules and how his is disappearing. Well, basically, there is some nodules here on this photo on the left where, you've got a plant root, that basically has incorporated bacteria in its root system to help meet its nitrogen needs. So it's almost like having a growth in your system, but again, it's that symbiotic relationship where the plant provides a home and sugars in exchange for the bacteria that's doing the nitrogen. There's your nodules that'll be fixing the nitrogen in the root systems. Okay, another thing that these cover crops do, as you can see here, is they reduce compaction. And again, you've seen that. And what tillage does, and one of the things that we did some interesting studies with some moose meters and infiltrometers a number of years ago here when I was working with some of the engineers. And one of the things we found is when you first till the soil, it is very porous. But after 1 or 2 irrigations, it collapses. Like Gabe was saying, and all the structure disappears. Now remember, the plants are trying to create an environment that's suitable for their growth so that they can be happy, healthy, just like we do. We want to be happy and healthy. We have a home, we do the things we need so that we're comfortable. But when we come in and we begin to disturb the soil, that's not a natural part of the system. So the plants have to kind of rebuild every time they have to rebuild their house, every time they want to grow. And so what happens is after 2 or 3 irrigations, it actually collapses. And by the end of the irrigation season, it's probably 10 to 100-fold times slower than when you first loosen that soil up. And so it's, 1 or 2 irrigations, you guys know it's really hard if you're doing fair irrigation to get the water down there to blacken out that soil. But then all of a sudden, when it collapses, it all just runs right on down with some of your soil. Okay, weed suppression. You heard Gabe talk about that. You get your cover crop, you get a stand. I mean, one of the things in my garden that I found out is that I do have to do some hand weeding when I get started, but I plant very densely in my garden, and once it canopies, I like to be lazy too. I just take it easy the rest of the summer. Because once it canopies, my weeds are not a problem. And if you can get your cover crop up and get it established, you will reduce your potential impact from weeds. Okay, using the dynamics of a multi-species system may help spread the impact of disease in future crops. And there's been quite a bit of study that's been involved with some of these things. But again, if you're healthy, okay, if you do things to keep yourself healthy as people, okay, then you are less susceptible to sicknesses and diseases. Same way in this community that we deal with as farmers and producers. Keeping our soil healthy does reduce the potential for disease. Okay, organic matter. Organic matter is the magic bullet to the biological component of your soil. You know, you hear, well, we got to find the magic bullet. Well, I haven't found too many in life, but when it comes to carbon and organic matter, it is the magic bullet. It's really hard to do things wrong with organic matter. There is some things, and you're dealing with carbon-nitrogen ratios, but organic matter is the key. That's what sustains life. Your carbon, their carbon. And they need the carbon to grow. They need the carbon to live and to be successful. And then, talking a little bit about legumes, they provide other things, such as nitrogen from the atmosphere. Again, Gabe talked about all that free nitrogen that's sitting above each and every one of our lands. Let's take advantage of that. Okay, but it just won't work. We've heard that. That's why we started doing what we're doing. It may work in North Dakota, Gabe, but it can't work here. Well, I think Gabe kind of said it. You got soil. If you got soil, it can work. And it's like trying to figure out the best combinations to make it work, okay? I've lived in several different parts of the country, and life in each part is a little different, and it takes some adjusting and adapting. And soil health is no different. The soils, if you have soil, you have the potential for soil health. Okay. It's all or nothing. No. One of the things that we do with our cover crop trials is we say, try a little bit, try 3 acres, try 2 acres, try a strip here, try doing this there. Let's do a little comparison. You don't have to go out and mortgage the farm to do this, okay? It's not all or nothing. It's how much you want to put into it. We furrow irrigate, it doesn't work. Well, it does work, and that's what we're going to be showing you today and in the future when we do our breakout sessions. Okay, it's complicated. It requires cover crops, amendments, microbugs, all this kind of stuff. No. Can you use these things? Are they potential tools? Yes. But as farmers, you know, you don't do everything for every crop all the time. You focus on a specific thing and you meet that crop's needs, however you deem fit for your production. Soil health is no different. I mean, we've got people that are doing things where basically they are allowing some of their small grain seeds to fall to the ground, and then they're just irrigating them and getting a cover crop afterwards, doing nothing else. Again, pretty simple, but again, it's meeting some of those soil health principles, keeping a living root, keeping the ground covered. And there is some truth to all of the above, but there are solutions and measures that address these and other potential concerns. Some of the cover crop trials we worked with this past 2 growing seasons examine these things. Like all things in life, it isn't just black or white. And sometimes it isn't always clear how it connects. But what we are finding is that it does work locally with existing irrigation systems, with many of the cash crops we have in the valley, and in all sizes of operations and applications. Okay, so we've been bringing, and we've been doing a lot of different things. And it's interesting to see what's happening here in the valley. I know you didn't see much, but we had a whole lot less at one time getting here. And basically what we found is that based on some figures that were given to us, and in 2009 we had about 300 acres of cover crops here in the valley, and in 2015 there was over 3,000 acres. And I've noticed it. If you've driven around here in the valley or you've seen the green in October and November that wasn't there before. So it is, people are doing it and they are seeing results. And this is the beauty of the system. The options of how, when, and what you can do are almost endless. It isn't one size fits all. You, the producer, determine what applications best benefit your operations and customize what you do to meet your needs using the many tools in your soil health toolbox. I mean, that's what it's all about, is fitting it to you. And that's one of these keys here. You don't have to mimic the guy next door. What are you doing? What do you need to do? What do you want to do? Okay, so here's some of the nuts and bolts of what we worked with this year, okay? And so basically, these are the trials. We had, let's see, we had a dozen or more different species that we worked with. We worked with 22 different landowners, over 1,200 acres. We had 7 different cash crops, okay? And we did 3 different soil tests. You heard Gabe talk about the soil tests. We did all 3 of the first ones you talked about here in some of the trials that we did. Okay, we did a variety of different species compositions, from monocultures to a dozen or more species. The plants in your mix are tools you are using to meet your objectives for your operation. Some mine, some mix, some form, and some fix. Just like in natural systems, each plant has its place and its specialty. And we did different varieties of preparations. We did tillage and we did no tillage. And we did different additives and fertilizers. I mean, it all depends on what you, the producer, want to do, to use, and to achieve. Okay, and some of the trials this year, we seeded in a lot of different ways. We used direct seeding, we used aerial seeding, where we actually had the seed flown on. We did broadcast seeding, and we did drilling. In the aerial seeding, we flew into corn, standing sweet corn stubble. Okay? And you know what? So far it worked for all of them. Okay, and some of the local trials this year were after a variety of cash crops, and these are some of the crops. We did row crops, we did small grains, and our trials involved hay and pasture. And of course, what does everybody want in life? The results. So we have some results. Basically, we put the information together in a spreadsheet, and I'm not going to ask you to read this. But basically, we captured some important things of what we did out there, from the different soil tests to the actual things, what we actually came into, seeded after. And remember, we worked for 22 different landowners, so they had a variety of things that we had going. And we put this all together in a big spreadsheet, and it was pretty interesting, because I had heard somebody ask about some of the forage production, some of the numbers. And here's some of the numbers that we got, which I thought was pretty interesting. Now this is after a cash crop. So it's after they've grown, the producer grew what they wanted to do that year. And so this is all after cash crops. And basically we ended up with 708 to 8,500 pounds per acre of production. Okay? So if you have a cattle operation, hopefully your numbers are going through your head. And somebody asked about what was in that forage. Well, we kind of got the same thing, Gabe. They told us that we had some pretty high numbers when it came to the palatability of this. And so we had up to 23% crude protein and up to 84% total digestible nutrients from our cover crops. And I guess the key to this too was much of this was green. Now, I'm not a cow, but if we were cows, what would you prefer? Green or brown? As a person, would you prefer fresh picked out of your garden? Yes. Too boiled from a can. So again, as we go through these pictures and you see where the cows are, and we found that out this year when we went out there, that the cows were in the cover crop. Even if it was under the snow, they were pawing and getting and eating the cover crop because it was still green. Okay, benefits. Direct economic benefits. Okay. Added grazing value, both quality and quantity. Again, your ground can be sitting there doing nothing, literally becoming a biological desert. It can be sitting there with nothing on it, or you can be doing something, producing something, and while you're producing something and adding money to potentially your pocket, you're helping your soil resource. So added grazing value and adding fertilizer, which again is something that many of us have to utilize to grow a cash crop. You recapture using some of the tools in your toolbox, okay? And then you can be fixing it from the atmosphere. Or your ground can be just sitting there doing nothing and waiting for you to do something with it. Okay. So, what happens after this? Well, we've got a few testimonials, and one of the things we're hoping to capture more this year is some of the after, what happens after. But this is some of the things that we were told by some of the producers this year. How about onions after cover crop? 917 sacks, 90% jumbo or bigger. That producer told me that cover crop more than paid for itself just there. Sweet corn. We heard somebody tell us, last planted, first harvested, ears average 1 inch longer. Talking about the quality of what we're producing, okay, as well as the quantity. Okay, cover crops make your soil healthier or better, resulting in potentially more robust future yields. Okay, and the benefits. Your soil, better tilled, higher organic matter, improved soil biology, increased moisture holding capacity, increased nutrient holding capacity, reduced erosion. We've heard all these things. As you continue to incorporate cover crops into your rotations year after year, your soil conditions continue to improve. Okay, and it's quality and quantity that you get. And I think that's important too. If we all just ate ice cream, we wouldn't have very good quality. But if we have a rounded diet, we have quality. And I leave you with this picture of the place that we happen to have some aerial seeding and sweet corn. You can see in the background there. But again, I mean, the choices are yours as to what you make, because the land is yours. And again, we were pretty happy with the results, and as I said, we'll go into those in detail later on. But right now, we're going to entertain some questions. Does anybody have any questions?
Any questions?
The cover crop field right up here on the hill behind the sweet corn was very impressive this fall. How many tons of dry matter or wet material did you get per ton to feed those cows off that field?
I think that was about 8,500 pounds dry weight.
8,500, so you got about just over 4 tons.
Yeah.
Just over 4 ton.
That's zero moisture.
That's, yeah, dry matter.
Dry matter. Got a question up here?
What varieties did you use for your cover crop, and when did you till them in, or how did you plant after the cover crop?
Well, it depended on the producer and some of their goals, so each of us sat down with them. Most of the species mixes were 5 to 6 species, some were a little more, some were a little less. The methods varied for the producer, what they had available to them, like in the case of the sweet corn where we flew it on. Some people disked and then broadcast it marked. Some people did interseeder, planted it in with a grain drill. It varied greatly. Was there another part of that I missed answering?
And then when you went to replant your next crop, did they just that in, or how did they?
It depended on the producer. Since these were just trials and it was open to them, we didn't say you had to do this or that. It was whatever they were comfortable with. And we'll hit some of that a little bit later on the individual producers too, and different cash crops.
Question here?
Yes, I have a question. I have thread and needle grass growing where I don't want it. Is there a way to use cover cropping to reduce that or even eliminate it?
What kind of grass?
Thread, needle. Needle and thread. Nothing eats it. It just grows and then sticks it.
Is it growing in a irrigated cropland or rangeland, or what's this?
Open field.
Open field, not irrigated.
Non-irrigated, just open field, left as it is, along with the mule shoes I find there and there. It's at 7,000 feet.
Yeah, probably one of those things we'd have to come out and look at your field and scratch our heads with you and try to come up with a solution.
Sounds like an on-site, yeah.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Just what's next?
What's next?
Yeah, that's a good question. We're open to ideas. 2 years ago, we had to go out and we had to find people to volunteer and to get them involved in our cover crop trial and idea. This last year, we had people coming in the door. So if you have some ideas, come visit with us.
Yeah, we're always hatching more ideas, it seems, when we get together, and we get pretty excited about this because we start to see some of the things, and we get the big picture. But basically, we've talked about seeding into the sweet corn 3 or 4 weeks prior. In other words, getting into some of the maybe companion type planting. We're also doing some inoculant trials that we're going to talk a little bit about more this afternoon. So we are looking at a bunch of different things, because again, there's so many things that we can do out there. And the idea is if we do a little bit and share what we get, then each of us doesn't have to reinvent the wheel.
Perfect segue, thank you. The person with the problem with the needle and thread gave answer to the question about succession. That particular grass is a low successional plant. And so you need to, if you can, and I would suggest that you go to Valley Food Partnership presentations and look at the fencing thing, which will be in there next week, at the end of next week. You need to use that and the cattle as a tool and move succession along.
Okay, maybe 2 more quick questions.
Could you talk about the seeding rate that you're using in your aerial seedings?
It just depends on the mix, how many pounds of seed you're putting out there. A lot of times we will focus on a couple things. People will say, well, I put 13 pounds of seed on, or I put 60 pounds of seed on. That doesn't really mean anything, because all seeds are different sizes and different weights. So what's more important is how many seeds per square foot are you trying to get on the ground. And you can have a 13-pound mix or a 300-pound mix and have the same number of seeds per pound, or same number of seeds per square foot getting on the soil. But what we flew on, it was around 45 pounds. And they could fly up to over 100 pounds of seed per acre, or as little as 6 pounds can go on. It just depends on the species that are selected and the size and weight of the seed, density of the seed.
One more question.
Yeah, you guys mentioned that you had a limited cost share. Will you just describe that real briefly, where that money came from and how that was used on the trials?
The first year we started this, we didn't have any cost share. And we did it on a fairly small scale so that the producers could evaluate for themselves if it was economically viable to do in the future. And we did receive some funding this year to help expand those efforts from last year. But we still cost shared very little per producer. They absorbed the bulk of the costs, and we contributed a little bit. Generally, we might contribute something because we want to look at something in particular, and so we wanted to pay to cover that. But what we would like to try to do is get away from, and I'm speaking maybe for myself more than others, is getting away from the idea that we need to cost share any of this. If it's not economically sound, why would you do it? So the cost share is only to help us and the producers experiment with things where I guess it minimizes some of the risk.
All right, thank you. It's a good segue into the...
Can I follow up a little bit on that, Mike?
10 seconds.
Just to follow up a little bit on it, the aerial cost was $10 an acre to fly the seed on. And we were supported by the Colorado Water Board this year with some monies, and that's what helped. And again, as Steve was saying, most of these people that are doing this, they continue without, any assistance at all. And the assistance that we did provide was minimal. Mainly we're running the soil tests and trying to document and get all the information together so that we can give it to you guys and get more people excited. So you're going to hear about it in the coffee shops, and you're going to hopefully hear about it here. And instead of 3,000 acres in 5 years, we'll see 30,000 acres. That's what we're hoping.
Nice goal.